guys, welcome back to our channel. Today's video we're going to be filling you in on a lot of stuff that went on after Maisie was born. You can tell from the title of this, it's about her NICU stay, and we're just going to be talking all about that. It's kind of sensitive. It's like just happened a week ago. We came home a little over a week ago, so it's kind of still hard to talk about for me. I don't know about Nick, but we want to talk about it because it's like real stuff that goes on. Not every baby comes home like right away and is healthy like you want them to be, but now that everything's over and it's been about a week and everything turned out okay, we feel a little bit more comfortable to talk about it. So I guess we can just get into it. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit and then Nick can talk about stuff that I missed and all that. So so Maisie was born the night of March 2nd. She was born right before midnight, and after all that, it took about 3 hours and we were moved over to mother and baby unit. They did all of her, they did like a shot and stuff. So they do like 3 shots when they're first born. They do like a initial assessment, weigh her, and then we're moved over, and then we pretty much went straight to sleep after that. So we were in there by like 2:30. We woke up at like 7 maybe, and didn't really think much. We were just taking care of the baby, like learning. And the first time that we noticed something was a little off was that morning. I was holding her. I can't remember exactly what happened, but one of us was holding her and we noticed that she turned a little blue, like her lips turned a little blue. Just for like a second though. Yeah, it wasn't very long. So we didn't think much. We were like, we've never had a baby.
Cooling down.
We've never had a baby, so we were like, I don't know, like, did she turn blue? We were both kind of like...
She didn't really look blue. It was just like, no, it was just almost blue. She just looked like kind of...
a different color.
Yeah.
Not like super pink. But we didn't really think much about it because it went away as fast as it came. And then Nick went home that morning to like go get changed and get some stuff. And then my parents came to spend some time with us. And that was around 10. And at 11 o'clock, I was holding her. We had just taken her newborn pictures, the ones that I uploaded to Instagram. And I was holding her and it happened again. And my mom saw it and she like got really scared and she was like, she's turning blue. And I was like, no, like she did this earlier. It went away. And then she didn't breathe through it. So my mom like got really scared. My dad picked up the baby for me because I couldn't even get out of the bed, and they ran into the hallway and got a nurse, and they took her back to the nursery, which is like where
they just monitor some babies that are having some issues.
Yeah, so they took her back there. Nick was showering and stuff, so I didn't tell him right away until he got back. I didn't want to worry him because I honestly didn't think it was anything. The doctors kind of just said sometimes babies do this. So yeah, and then what happened? So they monitored her like all day.
It happened again later that evening, and when it was happening, her oxygen levels were dropping dramatically, so they were having to give her some oxygen, just like a little over the nose and mouth face mask, and they'd kind of stay low for a second and then they'd rise back up really quick. And then the doctor there made the call to go ahead and transfer her to the NICU down in Nashville, which is the closest one to us because the hospital on post doesn't have that type of facilities for infants. So they made the call to transfer her, and she was transferred like 7:30 that evening. They have a unit from the hospital down in Nashville drive up in an ambulance with a bunch of specialists. They have like a neonatal specialist, nurse practitioner, a respiratory therapist, all come, and they have like a special it's like a normal gurney for that you'd use for like a normal person, an adult, but it has a special like modified I don't know, like one of the boxes you see that like NICU babies in.
Yeah.
So they put her in one of those, and then we had to sign some paperwork and stuff saying, you know, that like we're authorizing them to transport her and everything. And then they drove her down there. I immediately left, went home.
Yeah, and I couldn't be, they said I could be discharged, but I had a hard time even walking that first. I couldn't, it was like, it took me like 5 minutes to even get up and like start walking. When I walked, it was like super slow. I was in a lot of pain still. And they said, we want to keep you one more night, pretty much. Yeah. Like Nick can go with the baby. You should stay one more night just so we can monitor you. So that was hard that night without her there and like kind of wondering what was going on. But
yeah, so I left the hospital, said bye to Becca because she's going to get discharged the following morning. And I went home, grabbed some stuff that I needed to grab from the house to go down to Nashville, and then drove down to Nashville at light speed. The ambulance left. From the time like the ambulance left the hospital and post, and from the time I left the house to go down to Nashville was like probably like 40 minutes or whatever. And by the time I got to the hospital, the ambulance had just pulled up and they had just let her in, or just wheeled her in up to the NICU floor.
And they called me like as soon as they got there, said that she was fine. She didn't have an episode. They were calling what was happening an episode throughout this whole thing. So she didn't have an episode on the way there, but they said her breathing was a little, they call it periodic breathing with like newborns. So I don't think at this point I thought anything was really wrong.
Neither of us did.
Yeah.
We just thought she was having, I guess, it's really common in newborns to have apnea spells. It's like sleep apnea for like adults. You know, while they're sleeping, they stop breathing, but babies just like do it while they're awake sometimes, and their breathing, like respiratory, just slows dramatically or stops, and
or she was gonna cough and she didn't want to cough, so she was holding her breath. That's like kind of what we were thinking was happening. Maybe she had like fluid in her lungs or something. So that first night, Nick got a room at the hospital. They gave him like a courtesy room, which was just like a hospital room that he could sleep in. They gave me and him some, there's like a webcam that you can watch your NICU baby on. So you can like log in and the camera's there and you can watch him through the night. So I saw her, I logged in like twice and saw her, and then through the night, it was turned off. It said like a nurse is working on your baby. So it was like, I saw that at like 2 a.m. and then I didn't see her the rest of the night because of that. But Nick, I don't know what happened when you got there.
I got there and I immediately went up to see her, and they every time you go in to see your baby in the NICU, they make you scrub in, like surgical scrub. You have to scrub all the way up to your elbows for like 3 minutes. So I scrubbed in. Then you have to don like a surgical gown, and I did that, and I went in there and I talked to the nurse, and like I wasn't really worried because they said everything went fine for the whole drive. And I sat with her for probably from like 8:30 or 9 to
and your parents were there. His parents drove down with him, so that he wasn't alone. I really didn't want him to be alone in Nashville.
And I sat with her for almost like 3.5, 4 hours. I sat there till almost 1, and then I went up to the floor above the NICU, and that's where the courtesy room was. And I talked to Becca for a little bit, and then I went to bed. And
at this point she wasn't hooked up to anything besides like normal monitors, like heart rate, oxygen level monitors, right?
Yeah, that was it. So just they monitor the 3 things. They monitor the O2 saturation, heart rate, and then respiratory rate. Those are the only 3 like that every baby in the NICU is hooked up to, like automatically. And that's all she was hooked up to at the time, and everything looked fine when I went to bed.
And then in the morning, I woke up at like 5. I couldn't sleep because I couldn't see her on the webcam, and I was like, why is this turned off still? And I was really worried. And I called. You can call, and you have like a special code so you can talk to the nurse about your baby. But I didn't know that for a while. So I was just waiting for Nick to wake up, pretty much, I thought. And then I got a call at like 6:30. No, I figured out the number, so I called them. I asked how she did through the night, and they said she had an episode. They hooked her up to an IV, so they turned off the web camera because they didn't want me to see her hooked up and wonder why and like freak out and stuff. So that's why it was turned off. She had gotten an IV because they started her on antibiotics because she had an episode. And then I got another call at like 7-ish. And the nurse told me that, oh, this is hard to talk about. The nurse told me that she had saw her episode and it looked like a seizure. So they were gonna hook her up to an EEG. Yeah. And Nick was still sleeping, but like, and I was freaking out. Like, I wanted him to go down there, and so I was like texting him like.
She called me in a panic, and my phone was like on vibrate, but it was like across the room, and I didn't hear it. And then I finally woke up and heard my phone vibrating, and I picked it up, and I saw it was Becca, and she was kind of hysteric. And
I just wanted him to get down there.
Yeah, so she told me that they thought she was having seizures. So I immediately jumped out of the bed, threw a sweatshirt on, and then my shoes, and then ran down to the elevators and went to see her. And I got in there, and they were immediately hooking up Maisie to the EEG machine. And for like anybody who doesn't know, the EEG monitors your brain waves. They do that for it was just
hiccups. She's definitely a hiccup girl. Oh my god, your hiccup. Look at that. You're so awake, baby. You're so awake.
They weren't 100% sure if she was having seizures, because when infants have seizures, it's not like it's typically not like an adult you'd see have a seizure, like violently shaking, or it's called posturing, where they're really stiff. Infants aren't really like that. They don't shake really. They do posture, but their posturing's kind of different, like what you'd see an adult.
She's got stiff, and her arms kind of wiggled.
Babies kind of, they arch their back a little bit, and they just kind of go stiff for, like, hers were definitely like less than a minute. I'd say like 45 to 60 seconds, like each time.
But
like the seizure itself.
Yeah.
But like when you could tell when they were starting, because she was hooked up on like the monitors, you could see her O2 saturation, because every time like a seizure would start, you'd see her O2 saturation just slowly start to drop from, you know, the high 90s or 100 to you know, at like some points I saw it get down to like the low 50s. And that was causing her to have those apnea spells, the seizures were. So whenever a seizure would start, her breathing would essentially stop, and they'd have to CPAP her. And that's just the oxygen mask with the little bag on it, and then it essentially forces her to breathe. And they were having to do that from the time a seizure would start to the end. The seizure lasting only about a minute, but before the seizure and after the seizure, it was probably, you know, it was usually like 3 to 4 minutes each time, having to CPAP her and get her oxygen levels back up and her breathing back going. But
he was calling me. He called me and told me he saw one. He was really freaked out.
Yeah.
When they hooked her up to the EEG, she had one like immediately, right? Or like as they were hooking her up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the first time Nick saw one.
That was Wednesday.
And I wasn't there, and I hadn't even left the hospital yet. It took a while before I was discharged.
Yeah, she was hooked up on the EEG, and I think from like early Wednesday morning, like just after midnight, from the end of Wednesday, she had like all in all like 12 seizures or something like that. And as she's on the EEG, the computer that's monitoring all this is tied into like the hospital's network, and like the neonatologist there, which is the NICU baby doctor, they can't diagnose like with seizures.
Alright, my camera died, so it's a couple hours later. And we had to put baby to sleep and feed her a bunch of times, so.
Alright, so as I was saying, I think the neurosurgeon, the pediatric neurologist has to review the EEG results just to confirm what is going on, and he did confirm
what they saw was a seizure.
Yeah, what they were seeing were seizures. I don't know. It was like maybe afternoon on Wednesday that the neurosurgeon got back to the doctor in the NICU, and then the doctor relayed that to us. After that, they started her on Keppra, which is a anti-seizure medication. They started her on that, and that's like the most common anti-seizure medication for adults and infants and children and everything. They started her on that, and
then I think I got there.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember, but they what they do is they do what's called a loading dose, which is like a larger initial dose to start the patient, I guess, off on the medication so they can kind of get it into their system quicker, and then they slowly do just maintenance doses through an IV. After they started that, she was on that for I don't even know how long, but
so that happened when I got there. So Nashville's about an hour from where we are. I drove there, or my dad drove me there. I was still having like a lot of trouble walking. Walked up there, and I was like super overwhelmed. I almost like passed out when I got to the desk, and it was like they had to give me a wheelchair and wheel me back there. And then Nick told me that
everything was going on.
Yeah, so he like updated me, like he didn't want to freak me out, I guess, like while I was on my way. So she had a couple more episodes while we had been driving, and it was just really scary to see your baby doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I went back there, scrubbed in, went back with her, and then sat with her for a while. And then I saw 2 or 3 for the time that I was back there. Oh no. Stretch. I tried not to freak out when it happened, because I mean, even though it was happening and it was super scary, the nurse was like always right there, so I wasn't scared that she, I don't know how to explain it. I was scared because it was happening, but she was okay. But what we were most scared of was what are these seizures doing to her?
They said something that was like really reassuring was babies that do have seizures usually don't have any long-term side effects from them, because babies, when they're born, their brains are underdeveloped, and it doesn't usually seem to harm the babies in any way,
because their brains are still making connections, and they can like connect around like,
and plus
damage
the seizures are so short. Most, even like adults that have seizures, you know, they still function normally minus having seizures, but shorter seizures don't usually tend to cause any like damage in the brain unless they last for like 30 minutes. That's what they told us.
But we were so scared, even knowing all this, and they also were telling us seizures are a super common thing that they see in the NICU, and there's always
at least one baby, or to like 1 to 3 babies in the NICU at a time that are having seizures. So it's, you know, it's not something that they've never seen before. It's really common for them,
right?
And they know what to do. They're the best.
They have like
at
steps that they take to. So at that point, we were kind of. They hooked her up to antibiotics because
they weren't sure if it was like a viral infection, a bacterial infection. So they ran her on just a whole smorgasbord of antibiotics. So just to cover anything that could possibly be. After they started the antibiotics, they were planning on doing a lumbar puncture, which is a spinal tap to get spinal fluid to make sure there's no, again, like viral infections. Because they said they have seen, but it's very rare, that babies are born with meningitis. And that's a disease. It's a sickness that causes inflammation and the swelling, like the lining of the brain, which they can cause seizures. It's pretty rare though. But they did the lumbar puncture serious. Just to check for that, and that came back negative.
Yeah. So throughout this, Nick and I, we got an extra night in the courtesy room, but we didn't sleep really. We were with her as much as we could be, and when we weren't with her, our parents were with her. We didn't want her to be alone.
Yeah, the only time she was really alone was we'd stay in the NICU, and the nurses there were really, really nice. They'd give us, they'd wheel in like 2 like recliners, like lazy boy type chairs, and we'd just sit there and sit with her all day from literally like 5:30 in the morning to like
9
later, sometimes like 1 in the morning.
And then we go to sleep for like a couple hours, wake up, and then
just repeat it.
We would check on her, go back to sleep. It was like we didn't want her to be alone. We were really scared. At the point, Wednesday was the worst day for us. So she was born Monday, got there Tuesday. Wednesday was the worst. But because there was so much unknown, so she was having seizures so much that it was like every time she was awake, almost she was having seizures, and it exhausted her.
Yeah, she'd pretty much sleep, and then like you'd see her start to wake up and think she's waking up, but it was just her starting to have another seizure again.
It was like this. It was literally.
And then right after that, she'd go right back to sleep. So every time she was awake, pretty much she was having a seizure, which was really scary.
And we were like, "Is she having seizures because she we had so many questions on Wednesday, and then we were being told all these different things. A nurse came up to the courtesy room that we were in. We were gonna take a nap. She had a couple episodes, but we were like exhausted. We needed to sleep. And our parents stayed down there, and then a nurse came up and ran down this list of what they were going to do and what could possibly happen, and it broke us pretty much. They were like, we're going to start this new antibiotic. If it doesn't work, she might need to be intubated because her stats keep dropping. It's really stressful on her body. And they told us, so lumbar puncture, MRI, what was the other thing? Genetic testing. They just went through all that with us, but Wednesday we were just praying and talking to everybody, saying please pray that this antibiotic works, because we obviously didn't want her to be intubated.
It wasn't, the antibiotics weren't, she just got them, they weren't doing anything.
Oh wait, no, the new seizure medicine, that's what I meant.
They started her on phosphenotoin.
Yeah.
Because the Keppra, the initial seizure medication, wasn't having any effect on her. She was on it for probably like 6-7 hours, and she wasn't showing any progress through that time. She wasn't having more, but they were becoming more frequent because she wasn't on a proper medication. So they put her on phosphenotoin. I think I'm saying that right. I think that was it. And that's a IV medication again, and they did the same load dose and then followed on with maintenance dose. And then after she received that, she didn't have any seizures after that.
Yeah, so we went to sleep, and she hadn't had a seizure since it, and we woke up, and that next day when we went and talked to the nurse, and she said she hadn't had an episode pretty much through the night. It was just we felt like maybe that was a turning point in the whole thing. So
it was just like a huge weight lifted off.
Yeah,
our
like we
shoulders.
literally
It was
just
crazy.
like broke down because we not knowing if she was gonna stop having seizures, and like that was gonna be kind of what was, it was awful.
Yeah.
So that worked, and then
After she was on the phosphonatoin for,
and that was
like
that was through an IV.
yeah, that was IV, and then she was
Oh,
on that
but
for like,
before that, she had,
thing.
while she had this, they moved her to a different part so that she could have more like specialized care. Like she had more room for her EEG. She was on oxygen, like a nose oxygen, and then to help her not be so stressed out, she got a feeding tube, which was scary. So I'm gonna insert some clips that we have and some pictures. So she was all hooked up to all kinds of stuff.
Oh, big stretch. Big stretch. Look at those feet. Kicking those feet. Kicking those feet, baby.
She had a feeding tube in her mouth, but luckily I was able to pump while I was there. They were giving her, supplementing her with formula, but once I started pumping, they gave her that through the feeding tube, which was really nice. And I finally felt like I could help her in some way, because breast milk is obviously really good. But then once she got on the medicine and it started working, they just were gradually taking things away. Like the oxygen, they started taking that away, then the feeding tube, and like it was,
and then the EEG came off, and then
yeah,
eventually
they
she was
did
just on
extra hours of the EEG to make sure that the medicine was working. So she was on it for over 48 hours.
Yeah.
But once that came off, we were getting updates from like the director of the NICU or whatever. I don't know. He's the guy in charge. He would come and talk to us every morning. And then it's hard to like remember exactly. I mean, we sat with her for so long. It's just like that was the majority of what happened. We were just sitting there.
Yeah, it was definitely like there's a lot to remember, but we were just so like absolutely exhausted.
It was like
and
we
just
couldn't even talk to each
mentally
other.
and mentally and physically and emotionally just.
We got a
drained.
Ronald McDonald House throughout
Yeah.
this time. We contacted them. We were able to get, and we went there, and it felt really nice to have somewhere to stay. It was like amazing if you ever are in this type of situation.
Shout out to Ronald McDonald House.
Yeah, for real.
Donate your money when you go to McDonald's.
Murphy.
They the Ronald McDonald House.
They provide so much
Yeah,
stuff.
we looked into getting that because one of the nurses that was like working at the front desk in the NICU, she suggested that just because like you can only they were really, she was really nice to extend the courtesy room that we had for, they only usually do it for one night, but she was really nice and she did it for us for a second night, and then after that we had to like, clear out. But we got in touch with in order to get like the Ronald McDonald House, or like there's another one down there, Hospitality House in Nashville. It's essentially the same thing.
It's like a free place to stay
for like parents that have
kids in the hospital,
children, or like they're in the hospital. But to get that, you have to have a referral from a social worker at the hospital. So we got in contact with the social worker. Social worker said she'd put the referral in, and then all we had to do was like fill out the background checks to for each place. So we filled out the Ronald McDonald House and the or whatever it's called, and we called
like a couple hours later.
A couple hours later, and the Ronald McDonald House has, I think, 36 rooms there, and the lady said, "Yeah, we have an opening. I just have to look at your background checks, and then I'll call you back and let you know if you are good." And obviously, she called back in like 15 minutes, and she said, "Yeah, you're good. Come by this afternoon and then check in." So we did that, and
it was really nice.
It was like really nice.
They
it
have
was like
free food,
brand new, renovated.
But it is like a kind of I mean, it's a nice place to go, but it's super somber. Like every time we went there, it was just like, we're so mentally exhausted and we have so much going through our heads that we barely talked.
Yeah.
Because we were just both thinking like, God, like what is going on with her? Like we were just, it was it was a nice place to land at the end of a day. They had a therapy dog.
Yeah, they had a therapy dog.
It was awesome. We walked in, we saw the dog, and I hadn't seen my dogs in like a couple days, and I was just like about to cry. It was, yeah. It was like a 9-minute drive to the hospital, so it was really close and nice. Definitely recommend it if you're ever in that type of situation. I also recommend like donating, like Nick said, if you ever are in the place to do so. Being in the NICU it definitely puts a new perspective on that whole situation. You know, people go through it, but then you're actually there and you're just like, you see kids that are there for a long time, and it's hard.
Yeah, there were some really tiny babies in there.
Yeah,
like,
there are a lot of preemies.
Like 3-pound babies.
And you know their parents are there for like long term.
Yeah, months and months.
Yeah. So, she got, I don't even know where to go. So our parents were there most of the time, so we were never alone. Shout outs to the parents. We seriously couldn't have done it without them. It was a very overwhelming experience, especially our first baby, and
having to go through that, yeah.
Like the first week of her life, like the first couple days of her life, it was hard. So she got the MRI. It was like kind of a big process. They like transported her through the hospital, and we decided to take like a break when that was happening. Like they took her, and me and him like went for a walk, and we were like just, yeah, right? And then we tried to like get out into the fresh air as often as we could, which wasn't very often, and I was like having a really hard time walking, like I said.
Yeah, I was having to wheel her around in a wheelchair.
Yeah,
it
was hard to stand up.
Like, not almost, she was definitely overexerting herself, you know, after having the child like 2-3 days ago, and she's trying
I needed to be with her, but and then at a point Nick was just like, you need to take care of yourself, because if you end up in the emergency room or something, I can't do this alone. So I like tried to slow it down. But she got the MRI. We waited. They told us it would be like a really long wait. We wouldn't know till the next day, so we kind of had that in mind. And then we got a call from my parents. They were with her, and they said there's been like a cancel. Somebody didn't show up, so they're gonna take her early, which ended up being like the biggest blessing, because we ended up getting the results that day.
Like literally a couple hours later, which is really nice.
So that was scary. We walked back. We were outside. My parents called and they said like they got the results. So we walked back in, and they'd gotten the results. Like the director of, is he like the director? Yeah, the guy in charge, Dr. Ishmael. He read us the results with like a nurse practitioner was there, and then our nurse for the day was there. And you want to explain it, because I don't really know how to explain it.
Yeah, so they said when they did the MRI, they tested, they make sure that the brain doesn't have any damage to it. So they're looking at the brain, making sure that all the different spots of the brain are lighting up on the MRI scan.
Meaning like they have blood and
meaning
oxygen.
That they have, yeah, there's no like tissue damage, nothing has died because of the seizures or anything. And then he said, that's what he started off with. He said everything lit up just fine, so there's no damage to her. And then he said that they did find something, and they don't know if this caused the seizures. They can't say for certain. They said what they found was she had a cephalohematoma, which is the lining. Okay, let me try to think. It's not the I don't think it's the lining. It's like the skin that surrounds the skull, and babies' skulls, you know, aren't formed all the way, so that, you know, they have like soft spots and stuff in order to, you know, help get birthed. So the cephalohematoma was a bleed underneath her like scalp, and then that resulted in pressure on the skull, and then there was another bleed inside of the lining of the brain, and when there's pressure that's built up inside of the skull and it pushes on the brain, it can sometimes cause seizures. They're not 100% certain if that caused the seizures, but they said most likely. And
they said it was good news.
Yeah, he said it was good news. The bleed had already stopped. They didn't have to do anything because of the bleed. They said it was most likely due to the birthing process.
So when I gave birth, they were telling me like her head was in a weird position, and she turned, and we don't know like for sure if that caused it, but it's kind of like,
we're not,
we just don't
we'll never
know.
So, but they said what blood was in there will get absorbed by her body. The bleeding had already stopped. It had subsided.
So they didn't need to do anything.
They didn't need to do anything. They said her body will just absorb that blood by itself, and then she'll be fine. So after that,
they transferred her to a different.
They transferred her to like a different room, which was just like a less severe side of the NICU, and they took her off all the stuff. And the only thing she was on at that point was just the heart monitor and the respiratory and the oxygen level.
Maybe. Yeah, I know you're hungry.
And then she was only on that for like another day, and then they took her off. And
that night they took her.
That was that night. Yeah, they took her off, and then she was just in a bassinet all by herself.
A crib.
Crib.
Like a little.
It's like a rolling bassinet.
Yeah.
So she was just in that, and then
the next day they told us that to be able to go home, you do a thing called rooming in, which you just spend the night with your baby, and the nurse comes checks on you every 3 hours, which is when they eat. They have them on a schedule while you're in the NICU. So we did that night. She passed the car seat test, and it was kind of like a crazy next day because it was just some stuff happened the next day where they were like, well, you might not get to go home. So there was a little bit where
we went home.
But we went home, yeah. But yeah, she's doing good now. There's a couple more tests. We have to meet with the neurologist still periodically. We're waiting for some genetic testing to get back to see if that says anything about why it was happening, but we're pretty sure that what they saw in the MRI is what happened. It kind of makes sense because the first night she wasn't bad, but then like you think when you get an injury, your swelling doesn't happen like automatically. It takes like a little bit of time. So it makes sense that her worst day was when things started to ramp up as the swelling got worse. And then hopefully as the swelling went down, it's why things got better along with the medicine. She's still on medicine twice a day, and yeah, she's doing good. She's gained
a fat, happy, healthy baby now.
I'll show you guys.
As of today, her 2-week checkup, she is 10 pounds and 7.5 ounces. Chunky.
Here she is. You guys, she's so sleepy. I shouldn't have done this. Go on, guys.
Ciao, guys.
So this is Maisie. She is big, sleepy, chunky girl. She looks so red right now. But she's doing good. We're very closely monitoring her. We're kind of paranoid. My mom had gotten the Smart Sock for her. So we have that on her every night, and it gives us a lot of peace of mind. But yeah. She's heckin' cute, guys. She's so cute. We're happy that part of her life, her journey is over. And we just wanted to share it with you guys because things happen, but also things, as bad as it was, we're happy to know that things get better. And I kind of wanted to share that with you guys. Like, it was so scary, but anybody that's in the NICU, maybe this can give you a little hope that things will get better. She looks so tired.
She's sleepy.
Yeah.
She'll be awake here soon and ready to eat.
Yeah.
Because that's all she does. Sleep, eat, sleep, eat.
She's doing good. She's alert. Eating, pooping. That's about it. That's all she does. but
cries when she's hungry, and then
yep. So that is gonna be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it as long as it was. But we wanted to share with you the real stuff. Let me show you her one more time. She looks just like Nick. I don't know if you guys can tell. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I post about her like every day on my stories and stuff. So follow me on Instagram, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
bye.
Bye.